In an era where oversharing has become the norm, where people broadcast every moment in high definition, those who carry real presence, those who radiate authentic power speak less. They guard certain truths like keepers of an ancient flame. Carl Jung, the pioneering explorer of human consciousness, didn't merely analyze the mind. He charted the hidden landscape of our inner world. Among his most profound observations was this: what remains buried in your unconscious will control your existence, and you'll mistake it for destiny. Certain revelations, when expressed prematurely or indiscriminately, become corrupted, manipulated, or completely misinterpreted. Even more tragically, they lose their potency. This isn't about using silence as manipulation. This is about silence as protection, as energetic discipline, as a deliberate practice in our chaotic, hyper-connected reality. By the end of this exploration, you'll understand why keeping certain truths private isn't deception. It is actually an elevated form of intelligence. We'll explore 6 hidden principles that, when revealed at the wrong moment or to the wrong audience, can shatter your mental equilibrium, scatter your spiritual focus, and paradoxically invite the very turmoil you're working to prevent. Let's dive in. First, never reveal what you perceive in another person's darkness. You've experienced this. You recognize someone's destructive patterns, their repetitive cycles, their unconscious behaviors. The impulse to help arises. You believe that compassionately showing them their reflection will create awareness. But Jung understood something crucial. Individuals cannot acknowledge their darkness until they're psychologically prepared, and imposing that awareness prematurely only generates shame, resistance, or withdrawal. The shadow, those disowned, unconscious aspects of ourselves, isn't something people suddenly recognize. When you illuminate it, it is something they must discover when they're ready for expansion. When you expose someone's hidden aspects before they possess the psychological strength to integrate them, healing doesn't occur, damage does. This explains why your most genuine observations sometimes backfire, triggering defensiveness instead of growth. Jung's research demonstrates that genuine transformation emerges when awareness meets preparedness, not before, and certainly not according to your schedule. If you possess this perceptive ability, honor your vision. Simply because you can perceive what is concealed in others doesn't make revelation your responsibility. True wisdom involves recognizing when silence serves better than speech, when to allow people to navigate their own journey. Second, the authentic reason behind your decision to distance yourself from someone. We often feel compelled to justify ourselves when withdrawing from relationships. Here is what is rarely acknowledged. Some departures aren't rooted in conflict or confrontation. They're about energetic resonance, incompatibility, and an internal shift that requires no external validation. When you've had a connection, you would recognize this as integrating a new dimension of your psyche. You evolved. Sometimes maintaining that bond would mean abandoning your authentic path. Explaining your departure to someone incapable of comprehension often sacrifices your inner tranquility. It opens doors to arguments, manipulation, emotional coercion. Your evolution doesn't require anyone's permission. This isn't abandonment without communication. It is energetic completion. Attempting to rationalize a soul-level decision to someone operating from ego will only pull you back into their turbulence. Your serenity isn't a negotiation. Allow the silence to communicate and let the boundary exist. Third, the compassionate acts you performed in private. In a culture obsessed with public displays of virtue, Performing good deeds without announcement feels revolutionary. That is precisely the significance. Jung believed that genuine individuation, the path toward your authentic self, demands internal congruence over external recognition. When you actual think, then it's and nobody witnesses it, like a sacred territory. That is authentic work. The instant you publicize your benevolence, it transforms into social capital. It ceases being pure kindness. It becomes theater. The spiritual essence evaporates. Worse still, it nourishes exactly what Jung cautioned against, your persona, the facade you construct to earn acceptance rather than embody truth. Your soul doesn't require an audience. It requires authenticity, that moment you assisted someone without documentation, without expecting gratitude, without social media validation. That was transcendent. That was consciousness expressing itself through you. When you give without attribution, whether energetically or materially, it resonates more powerfully than any announcement could. Let your higher consciousness bear witness. Let universal law record your contributions, not public platforms. Fourth, avoid discussing your aspirations before they've taken root. There is profound wisdom in how seeds germinate in darkness. Silence nurtures potential. Before a vision materializes, it exists in a delicate sacred state. Speak prematurely, and you invite skepticism, distortion, or envy into that space. Jung investigated the concept of psychic energy, what he termed libido, not merely as desire, but as vital life force. Every intention, every ambition carries this psychic charge. When you share plans too early, you dissipate that energy, you fragment it, you expose it to vulnerability through others' opinions, criticisms, or disbelief. Recall those instances when you shared your vision and encountered skepticism, or worse, polite disinterest. Something deflated within you in that moment. Not because your vision lacked merit, but because it wasn't developed enough to withstand scrutiny. You were still cultivating it. You needed incubation, not exposure. The psyche functions like fertile ground and like life developing in the womb. Your concepts need time to form. Premature disclosure resembles opening the oven mid-bake. The heat escapes. Nothing rises properly. This isn't about secrecy. It is about sovereignty. Your visions deserve the foundation of your conviction before facing the winds of others' doubt. Continue nurturing, continue constructing, and when the manifestation becomes undeniable, explanation becomes unnecessary, you simply embody it. Fifth, your judgments about other people. You might consider sharing your assessments, particularly regarding people in your social sphere, as inconsequential. But here is the hidden truth. When you speak about others, you're simultaneously revealing yourself. Jung famously observed that everything irritating us about others can illuminate our own self. Understanding. This means your commentary about others frequently reflects your internal landscape more than their reality. Criticizing someone, especially casually or within shared circles, often represents your shadow speaking, that disowned aspect of yourself. The jealousy, the inadequacy, the anxiety gets externalized. When we speak from that place, it is not insight, it is projection, and people intuitively recognize it. Additionally, if your listener lacks grounding, that information becomes gossip, fuel, and weaponry, potentially used against you regardless of your intention. Conscious individuals might recognize your projection. They won't confront you directly, but they'll remember, they'll identify patterns, they'll understand your observations about others function as mirrors, not windows. Those lacking self-awareness will repeat your words, perhaps distort them, perhaps quote you out of context. Suddenly, you're entangled in a narrative you never intended to create. Safeguard your energy and your discernment. When tempted to speak about someone, pause and question, is this about them, or am I revealing something about myself? Remember, clarity doesn't always require vocalization. Some truths serve best when held internally. Sixth, the private dimensions of your intimate relationship. Everyone needs outlets occasionally. But there is a critical distinction between seeking support and exposing sacred details. Each time you share intimate truths about your partnership, especially during conflict, you're introducing external energy into a space meant for protection. Jung would describe this as the sacred union of polarities, anima and animus, feminine and masculine, the internal partnership. When you disrupt that dynamic with gossip, complaints, or overexposure, you create fractures in the psychic connection. Support is healthy, but oversharing every disagreement, every vulnerability, every frustration, that is not healing, that is hemorrhaging. Each disclosure invites interference, envy, comparison, perspectives lacking your complete context. Even well-intentioned friends can contaminate the waters. Suddenly, someone without full understanding of your bond offers guidance based on fragments, and those fragments distort your perception. Energetically, your relationship operates at a specific frequency. Speaking about it, particularly in frustration, disrupts that field. You begin emphasizing flaws over development, problems over progress. Jung would remind us that relationships function as alchemical containers. They transform us, but only when we protect their sacred space. When the internal dynamic faces constant external judgment, it loses transformative power. Seek therapeutic support, journal, meditate, but allow your relationship to exist in sacred privacy. What is protected flourishes. What is constantly exposed diminishes. Now that you've absorbed all 6 principles, pause for reflection. This isn't merely a catalogue of things to withhold. It is a framework for maintaining your inner equilibrium, spiritual progress, and energetic integrity in a world constantly demanding transparency. Jung's psychology wasn't about pretense or performance. It centered on integration. Becoming whole, part of that wholeness, involves knowing what to leave unspoken. Because silence isn't void. It is wisdom. When you don't expose what you perceive in another's shadow, you honor their journey. When you don't justify your departures, you preserve your frequency. When you don't broadcast your kindness, you allow the universe to witness it. When you don't announce your plans, you give them space to develop and manifest. When you don't judge others, you liberate yourself from your own projections. When you maintain romantic intimacy as sacred, you strengthen the bond. These aren't commandments, they're disciplines, practices of an awakened mind, a developing soul, a life unfolding in alignment with something deeper than validation. You don't need to vocalize everything you experience. You don't need to justify everything you do. In truth, the more aligned you become, the less explanation you'll require. Next time you feel compelled to share one of these 6 things, pause and ask yourself, does this serve my higher consciousness or satisfy my lower impulses? If this exploration brought you clarity, share it with someone ready to reclaim their peace. Comment below, which principle resonated most powerfully, or which have you violated before, and what did that teach you? If you're committed to self-awareness, energy work, and elevated consciousness, subscribe to Fractal Wisdom for content that speaks directly to your essence. Thank you for your presence here. Now go safeguard your power.